Thank you, Jane, for agreeing to this interview. Is it possible to begin with just to explain your background and what you do, really?
Yeah, yeah, I'm an educational psychologist. I was a Senko and a primary and special school teacher. I actually started my career in education the same year that the Warnock Report was published, which was a very long time ago, 1978. So I've actually worked in education for over 40 years, and I've been an ed psych for 30 years, having come from a background in teaching. I worked for local authorities as an ed psych for most of my career and then took early retirement and set up my own independent practice. So I'm now an independent educational psychologist working part time because I love applying psychology so much I can't quite stop to let it go altogether. So I just work part time, and one of the things I do as part of my ed psych work is diagnostic assessments. So that's where I sort of come into the picture here with Patos.
Mm. And also, you're involved with SATs, aren't you, in STEC?
Yes, I'm a member of STEC, so I'm a member of the SPLD test evaluation committee. Yes, I am. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. What is CAS theory, what the CAS 2 is based on it? And we should also say the CAS 2 is still open for specialist teachers now to
Yeah,
purchase.
absolutely. Yes, yes, it's accessible for specialist teachers. Absolutely. So PASS theory is what underpins the CAS, and PASS stands for planning, attention, simultaneous, and successive processing. PASS theory is based on the work of Alexander Luria, who was a Soviet neuropsychologist. And Luria's approach to defining and describing intelligence was very, very different from the sort of static eugenics-based view. And Soviet psychology, I mean, we're talking about the Soviet era, Cold War era, prior to the fall of communism. And Soviet psychology was hugely influenced by what we call socio-cultural theory, which basically says that social and cultural factors affect our development, including the development of our thinking skills. And that leads to the idea that those skills aren't fixed because they're mediated. I mean, many people listening to this may have come across Vygotsky, who's perhaps a
Mm.
little better known. I mean, Vygotsky and Luria were contemporaries. Vygotsky died very young, sadly, and because Stalin didn't like his work, it wasn't sort of known in the West. So Vygotsky and Luria were contemporaries, and so Luria came from that sort of Soviet psychology, socio-cultural stable, where the idea of non-fixed abilities was very much part of his thinking. And how Luria described intelligence was in terms of what he calls functional units of the brain. And he proposed that there were three functional units. So the first functional unit was what he was attention. So being able to focus and resist distractions. The second functional unit is what he called simultaneous, simultaneous functional unit, and that's about whole to part, working with things or ideas that form a whole. Another part of the second functional unit is successive, so working with things or ideas in sequence. Luria's third functional unit was planning, so thinking about how to solve problems and to work systematically. So Naglieri and Das, the authors of the CAS, based the CAS on those functional units. And what they've done with their PASS theory is they separated those three functional units of Luria's into four. So where Luria's got successive and simultaneous processing as one unit, Das and Naglieri divided into four. So planning, attention, simultaneous, and successive. So planning, as I've said, is being able to plan, to set goals, to work systematically. Attention is sort of self-explanatory. It's about paying attention, resisting distractions, being able to sustain attention, being able to shift attention. Attention's interesting, I think, because a lot of people think, it's just a very one-dimensional thing, and actually it isn't. because we need to maintain attention to see a task through to the end, but we also need to shift our attention from one stimulus to another. We also need to resist distractions. So it's a very sort of multifaceted aspect of our cognition. And then we have simultaneous processing, which is about how things relate together, seeing the whole, the whole from the part, how things go together. And that can work in a number of different ways. You know, if I was working in EYFS in foundation stage, I might be sitting down with a pupil doing a sorting activity. So can you sort out all these objects, you know, and put all the red ones together, all the blue ones, or all the cars, or the teddy bears?
Mm.
And that's exactly the same as if I went into a key stage 4 lesson on RE or citizenship, and we talked about the difference between democracy and totalitarianism. Exactly the same thinking skill. Simultaneous processing, be able to see how things relate together, being able to see the whole from the part.
Mm.
An example from reading comprehension might be, I read a passage. What's the main idea of that passage? That involves simultaneous processing. And then successive processing is about sequence and order and pattern. So, you know, that's got a very strong link to something like mathematics, for example. But also when we think about the basic skills of reading and writing, you know, when we do spelling, we look at letter order. When we do phonics, we look at letter order. We look at word order in a sentence. We look at paragraph order when we're writing. So so they've all got applications to the basic skills that specialist assessors might look at. And I think I mentioned earlier that the publication Helping Children to Learn follows up each of those 4 areas. So once you've done the CAS assessment, you'll end up with a profile of strengths and areas of need. You know, that it may differ. You might have a pupil that's got, you know, all areas are weak. There might be a profile of strengths and weaknesses. And then you can choose some handouts which explain what the aspect of processing is and how to support it. Some of the handouts are written for children and young people, so they're aimed at the learner. So and that's also very helpful because it talks about how to be smart and to plan, or to, you know, see order and pattern. So they're very helpful. Some of the other handouts in the book relate specifically to areas of basic skills. So one of them is called Plans for Reading Comprehension, Story Plans for Writing, or Letter Order for Spelling. So that's the sort of past theory and how it underpins the CAS.
Brilliant. And there's been quite a lot of publications of how it feeds into the assessment of dyslexia and the support of dyslexia, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's some publications out there which look specifically at dyslexia. I think DAS in particular has published some papers about reading and dyslexia and the CAS. I think because the CAS looks at those underlying processes, we can apply those to things like reading, spelling, writing, maths, because they're cross-curricular and they're foundational. Because if a learner does have deficits in those areas, it makes the process of learning more challenging for them.
Now, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong here, but to my knowledge, with both Das and Neguali are speaking, I don't know of any other, because Das wrote a whole book about using literacy intervention around the past theory. I don't know of any other theory or model of assessment and intervention that combine both.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, there might be something out there, but
Might be. Saying that's always a hostage to fortune,
yeah, there's always that caveat, isn't there? But certainly, I mean, I've used the CAS for many years now, and I've done lots of reading, you know, around the subject, and I haven't come across anything else. And this, I think this is the thing that you know, always brings me back to the CAS. You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm a member of STEC, and so, you know, I do some test reviews, and sometimes some of the tests that we review and we use, I get to the point of applying what I call my so what test. and you administer this test. So what? So what happens afterwards?
Mm,
And there are some tests which certainly fall into that category. You do some sort of static
mm,
assessment of cognitive abilities, and they go nowhere.
mm,
Whereas this takes us, the CAS and the past theory takes us straight from assessment to intervention.
mm,
Um, and it's not a difficult journey because that's how it's set
mm,
up, because of the underpinning theory it's based on. You're not having to stretch a point and think, oh,
mm.
there's this very tenuous link, because it's designed to feed into intervention.
Thank you. I believe you listened to a concert for doing the interview. Uh, uh,
Yes, I mentioned that when we exchanged emails to sort of finalise arrangements, I was just on my way to listen to Richard Strauss's Ein Heldenleben, A Hero's Life. And many years ago, a head teacher said to me, "You must always listen to Ein Heldenleben before an interview." So I've been listening to that to big myself up for the hero's life.
do you
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
worked? Do you think there is actual link
Um,
between listening to sort of
Well,
classical
I'm a
music
great
and
believer
helping?
in the power of music, I have to say, and it really speaks to me. I mean, that particular piece is amazing, and yeah, it certainly has the wherewithal to to calm you, and equally to excite you as well. So it's interesting. Not all music has a programmatic element, but nevertheless, Ein Heldenleben does, and it's an interesting piece of music. It's autobiographical about the composer's life, but it's a fascinating piece of music, and I've always hung on to that advice about listening to a hero's life before an interview. So it'll, yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your support and your help and clarifying all the information. Thank you much indeed.
Thank you very much for asking me, Kevin. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure talking
You're
to
welcome.
you. Thank you.
And you. Thank you.